Welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Lindsey, and I am one of the counselors at Moon Prep. And today we will be discussing crafting a standout personal statement. And to help you demystify this part of the college application process, I have Michaela, who's one of our counselors here at Moon Prep, as well as a new guest, Erin. So Erin, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm so glad to be on here. So I've worked with Moon Prep for several cycles now and love writing personal statements. It's one of my favorite parts of the application process. Through that, we get to know a lot about each student, which is really fun. And I've worked in higher ed as an English professor for over a decade. So writing and essays and all of those, similar types of things are in my wheelhouse and things that I love to do. So we're really excited to get to talk about how to make your personal statement stand out among the crowd.
And Erin and I share lots of students. My name is Michaela. I've been on the podcast before, but I'm joining this one because I used to be a college admissions counselor at a university. So I got to see a bunch of the personal statements and then worked for a magazine, an editorial magazine, before coming to Moon Prep. So you have all the college admissions counselors and writing people on this podcast.
Yeah, we're excited. And we've all seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the personal statements. So we're happy to give some tips today as, hopefully kids are starting to take advantage of their summer to write their personal statement. But before we dive too much into it, Erin, can you tell us first, what is the personal statement?
So the personal statement is going to be the essay that everyone sees. So it's a little longer than some of the other essays that you'll write through the application process. It's 650 words, and it's pretty much going to be what showcases you to these institutions that you're applying to. And if they didn't know anything about you coming in, this is going to give them a window into who you are. And one of the things about the personal statement that we want to drive home is, these counselors and readers for these essays are going to have stacks of essays every day that they're looking through. So what about you is going to stand out in your personal statement? And so that's kind of where we like to put our focus is, what's going to make them remember you out of this stack of papers.
I know, Erin, you kind of covered this already, but Michaela, do you want to expand a little bit on the purpose of the personal statement?
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at your 5 best friends, you might realize around your school that there's not too much of difference between you and your other peers in school. So this essay is truly meant to just go beyond your resume. They are going to have a snapshot of your resume in the activities list section of the common application. And so this essay is really there for them to get to know your personality and your voice. What differentiates you between, if you do all 5 activities on your resume with your 5 best friends and you all apply to the same school, why would that college pick you? So this personal statement is meant to be a story that says everything it needs to say about your personality and really let them get to know who you are.
And I guess one thing we should have said too before is we're talking mostly about the Common App, but I feel like we're pretty much using, you could change it out for Coalition or Apply Texas. They're pretty much the same concept. The prompts change slightly, the word counts change slightly, but this advice will be pretty much universal because it's the same concept, like this one essay that's going to go out to all the schools, on those big application platforms.
Yes, and so we're going to be using the Common App lingo today, but it is pretty universal. The activities list will just look different on different college application platforms, but it'll be the same. And just to go more into the personal statement too, it's going to go to just about every school on your list. There are going to be some schools that don't even ask for it or look at your personal statement. Those are pretty far and few between. But it is also important to know, this is sometimes shocking to parents, that there are schools that will ask for more essays beyond this one. They have to write more than just this one essay. So just make sure as we move forward talking about tips and tricks and ideas for brainstorming, that you aren't using overlapping content and talking about the same resume item over 3 essays. So when they the student does the college list, map out all of the supplemental essays they need to write first, and then pick your personal statement topic.
All right, let's dive in a little bit into the personal statement prompts. So on the Common App, you have 7 different prompts to choose from. These have stayed pretty consistent. I believe like only one has really changed in my recent memory over the like last 5 or 6 years. But for the most part, they're consistent. So honestly, no matter what time of the year, if you wanted to get started writing your essay in February and they haven't been finalized for the upcoming year, you can feel pretty confident that you can get started. And you'll see why soon enough. But Erin, do you want to kick us off talking about prompt number 1? Can you read it off and maybe give an example of a student or some tips for this one?
Sure. Yeah. So prompt number 1 for your personal statement says some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. And so this one is kind of broad. I feel like it could encompass any number of things for students, but one that really stood out to me that a student of mine wrote recently was about thrift store items. And so she was an avid thrifter, but her family was not into the fact that she liked to thrift. And her kind of opening paragraph, like a kind of a quick gist of that was that she said, while some kids steal their parents' keys to sneak out to do nefarious things, I always would sneak out and go to the thrift store. And so it was kind of funny, a little like tongue in cheek, but then she spent the rest of her, paragraphs giving really specific, detailed examples of certain items that she's found that then spoke to something about her personality. Like she loved finding like individualized gifts, and she would use those gifts attached to a person she gave it to explain like their importance in her life, and how certain like books and magazines like played a role in her like kind of internal development. And so that was really cool. She was great at incorporating really nuanced levels of detail and descriptions, but it almost gave these like little individualized windows into aspects of her personality. And so it provided some depth and breadth to who she was. And so that one was, I think, really impactful and worked really well for this particular prompt.
Yeah, I had one student who used this prompt as well, and his was about how in like doing jazz and being like on a rescue squad require like a really similar like skill of being able to like improvise. And so he wove together like 2 different, I would say, like identities or interests together into this one essay. And it was really effective actually, because he did have like a lot of growth throughout it as well. And we got to see a lot of like internal narration about like his thought process and how he was able to, learn how to improvise a little bit better and think on his feet in like the medical setting too. So I feel like overall it showed like good qualities and traits of the student, and like the jazz and improvise part of it was like a good way to like a good vehicle for those qualities he wanted to showcase. All right, Michaela, how about prompt number 2?
Sure. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? Now, Erin and I shared this student, and so I don't know if I'm going to mess this up, but we had a student whose essay started, it was all about a religious ceremony back in his parents' home country where his head was shaved, but the details really brought you into the story. There's a lot of show, don't tell, because we were brought into this moment with him. And the rest of the essay was a lot of self-reflection over how he had gotten there and how his beliefs like lined up with this ceremony, and just like how he had grown as a person to get to this ceremony. But it was just an incredible essay, and one that perfectly matches the prompt about obstacles we encounter can be fundamental in a time that he faced kind of a challenge, setback, or failure, how he bounced back from that and made it to this religious ceremony.
think one like trap that students fall into a lot with this particular prompt is that they talk too much about like the challenge, like that's 75% of it, like the before stuff, but then they forget like the most important really part is the second part of the prompt, which is like how did it affect you and what did you learn from the experience? It should really be like 25%, maybe 30% about, or potentially even less about the obstacle and like your story, and then mostly about growth and like how you evolved and like maybe applied those lessons elsewhere if you have room or like the ability to do that. So that's, I think, the biggest trap I see or biggest mistake I see a lot of the times in first drafts. Too much of the problem, not enough about growth.
Yeah, this prompt is not a place to kind of trauma dump everything that's bad that's ever happened to
Yeah.
you. It is a time to show growth.
That's a good thing to think about for honestly all of these is you don't want to like complain about like the lot in life that you have. You know, this could be really easy to show kind of like a woe is me type essay, but I mean, college application or college admissions officers aren't necessarily like pitying who's had the worst life, you know, comparatively. They really do want to see like how you rose above your challenges and, you know, the resilience side of things too. So that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind.
And this is just a note from the college perspective. When I was reading applications, there were so many just really negative essays that never had an uplifting ending or turning point. Just a lot of very negative essays. So just realize that the college admissions, professional on the other's end of your application is wading through hours of pretty negative essays before they get to yours. So just having like an uplifting ending will really stand out.
All right, I'll read prompt number three and share my story about that one. But prompt number three is reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking and what was the outcome? So for this one, our big piece of advice, which mirrors exactly what Michaela was just saying, is we definitely don't want to be argumentative or combative. Like this is definitely not the place to be negative. You're not trying to like put down other people. You're really trying to show once again a little bit of growth potentially or how you handled obstacles. So it's almost similar to, I would say, like the previous prompt as well. Now for this one, I think it would be really easy to kind of fall into a cliched topic. Like I feel like students might want to talk about religion potentially. I had one student that I read that could have been really cliched where he talked about like when he found out that the tooth fairy wasn't real and how, you know, he had to question that belief really of the tooth fairy. And so it was kind of a cute story, but like one good thing that he did was obviously he discovered that the tooth fairy wasn't real when he was younger, but he was able to pull the story into like his high school years too and really showcase who he is now, not just when he was, you know, 7 or 8 or however old he was. So it was kind of like a cute story that could have been cliched, but he added so many specific details about himself that it made it totally fine.
Yes, and I had a student too who did the exact same thing you're talking about not staying negative. Her essay was about how she stood up to a judges panel at a robotics tournament that had tried to disqualify her team for a small rule, but she actually knew the rule book so well that she could recite it from memory, and she knew that her team had not broken a rule. So she really gathered up her courage and came back to the judges panel about this rule and was able to make sure that her team wasn't disqualified because she had prepared in advance. So it was all about showing that she had learned the importance of really preparing and knowing everything about your sport or activity before you go in, and how just being well prepared can really, help your success in the end. But it was never negative. It was never about her arguing with the panel and then like winning. It was just about doing my due diligence. The weeks leading up to this had a favorable outcome. And this is how I defended and supported my teammates.
Erin, will you do prompt number four for us?
Sure. Prompt 4 says reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? And so with this one, it's kind of a tightrope walk sometimes because you want to discuss things that are, authentic and sincere. And actually, an idea that I had come up with a former student's personal statement was she mentioned being very grateful to this, like, it was a shoe salesman, and that's kind of an unlikely person to mention, but she was really tall, this student, and she always felt, self-conscious about wearing heels. And so one time she was trying on a pair of heels, and this salesperson just commented, "Wow, like you look, so statuesque, like you look like a model. Those shoes were made for you." And it was this kind of turning point in the student's like perspective of herself that, she didn't have to shrink when she entered into a room. And so if she was, well over 6 feet tall with a pair of heels, and she would own that. And so she kind of, took that perspective into other aspects of her life, but that she was focusing on her thankfulness and gratitude for this, unlikely encounter that she had with this person that really changed her perspective of, who she was in different arenas, which was it was a sweet, sweet essay.
I
That's a cute
remember that
one.
essay. It was so good.
Yeah, yeah, I know. She was another
Powerful.
student that you and I shared, and I know it was such a good essay, and it was, again, it was genuine, it was authentic and sincere. And with this one, it's important to, I think, incorporate those things and try to avoid like bragging or, things like that, that you are actually, grateful towards someone, and explaining the reason why and that impact in your life.
Yeah, that essay was so powerful. And I think
Hmm.
one of the best parts about it is that it stayed centered on her and her finding her own power. And so as a reader, we learned so much about her, even though the essay was technically thanking that, unlikely worker, encounter that she had. And it was just a great essay all around.
And it goes to show too that this was not an essay about like her any resume item. I mean, maybe incorporated like a few things, I have no clue, but it was about high heels and like, being confident in yourself too. So that's kind of the nice thing about this is you like brainstorm your topic. It doesn't have to hit like your major extracurricular items as long as it does show like good qualities about yourself, things that the colleges would like to see. So that's kind of the beauty of some of these essays is they're not what you expect, and that maybe is what makes them stand out. Michaela, do you want to tackle number 5, prompt number 5?
Absolutely. Okay, so it goes discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. So this is, again, they're specifically asking for growth. So they have it spelled out for you right here. So the things we've been saying across all the other prompts are even more so true here. This is not about talking about your resume items and trying to cram in a whole bunch of things. It's really talking about your growth. So I had a student in a past year talk about watching his dad's work ethic and the different things in their life that affected his dad's work ethic and how important it was for him to emulate the same work ethic that he was shown from his dad, but then also learn from his dad's mistakes and have a better balance. And so there was an event that surrounded that, and it did happen to have some tragedy involved, but the whole essay was about his personal growth and how he internally reflected on how he needed to kind of like right the wrongs, the negative patterns that he had seen over the past generations in front of him. And so it was very, very powerful.
Yeah, I
And
just didn't,
again, nothing about the resume at all.
do kind of a similar thing, but it was kind of like a realization that she wasn't treating the people in her life the way she should. And it's like really easy to like have those epiphanies that like, oh, maybe I should be a nicer person, but then not really act on it. But she did definitely put in a lot of work and kind of detailed those moments. And so I feel like it showed a lot of like, and I think probably for your student too, Michaela, a lot of like emotional intelligence throughout the process too, which is another thing I feel like a lot of colleges are kind of looking for in their students, kids who who are self-aware and can put in like that hard work to better themselves.
Absolutely. Mhm.
All right, I'll read number 6, which is describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So, like, one piece of advice about this one is don't make it a why major essay. You're likely going to have like why major or even like why this school, which could incorporate a little bit about like why you're interested in the major in it potentially. Like you're going to have room for those types of things. So take a look at your college list and see like, does it make sense to talk about how, your love of biology is why you want to study, like why you want to study biology in college, and things like that. Because what will you write about that's going to be unique in your why major essay? Same thing for like why med. We want to have kids avoid conflicting topics here with like what they might want to put in like their why med, why doctor, why dentist, like those types of essays for like our BSMD or BSVMD students. So I think Michaela said it at the top of the podcast, but just take a look at the other essays and prompts that you might be having to write, and that can potentially help you plan out this prompt too. But I think Erin, you had an example for this one, right?
Yeah, we actually had a really great example for this one, in particular because it was about, a topic that you could major in. It was geography, but this particular student wasn't majoring in that. It was just something that he had been engrossed in and kind of an immersive interest from a really young age. And so this particular essay kind of opened up with there was almost some intrigue and some mystery, which was kind of cool. And how he described, finding his way into the basement of their house and, kind of covered up in a corner, there was this old dusty atlas. And from that moment on, this particular topic of geography and how that incorporated culture, and learning about different cultures really just consumed his attention, and that led him to sort of a lifelong interest in this particular thing. He ended up doing different geography competitions and geography bees and helped create online curriculum and courses for kids interested in geography as well, and tutored in the same sort of areas. So this essay was really neat because we got to see different aspects of who they were. Like they tutored and they were self-starters, but also really interested and committed to learning about different cultures and how all of these connective pieces of these cultures are related to one another. So it sort of zoomed into like microscopic level and then zoomed out to like Google Earth, like how we were all connected, and that while he wasn't pursuing this as a major, that it was still a lifelong interest he was going to carry on into college. So it was neat, a good way to use this particular prompt.
Love it. Michaela, can you do the last prompt, which is definitely the most general prompt?
Yeah. It starts, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So at first glance, this seems like the perfect catch-all that you should be able to submit an essay you've already written for school about, an English book that you read or for language class or something. But that's not really what they're asking for. They're asking for an essay where they get to know something about you that just doesn't maybe match with the other prompts above. I really don't usually recommend that students use one they've already written. We want to brainstorm out everything the right way. And if what we come up with just doesn't fit with another question, we can't make it fit the question, then we submit it here. There actually have been some studies done, and I don't really know the articles off the top of my head, but they're probably through the Common App, where this is probably the most popular prompt, this one,
Yeah.
and then the first prompt of
Mhm.
the interesting background.
I
But
read this. Yeah, I read the same thing. I think like 20% or 25% of students pick prompt number 7. And I think it's one of the more popular ones with my students too.
mhm. And so examples of this, that we wouldn't want students to do is there was an essay submitted this past year that was just a student talking about the different philosophical theories that he subscribed to, and it really read like something he had done for school. So we had to backtrack and start over with that essay.
Now, whenever you were reviewing college, like personal statements, did you even like look at the prompt that they were selecting, or did you just read the personal statement itself?
Yeah, we never looked at the prompt.
Okay. Yeah.
I never noticed what the prompt was. So it really doesn't matter what prompt you choose. It's not going to matter in the long run at all, which is
Yes.
probably why students choose this last prompt a lot.
Yes. Because I was talking about that with my students too, because they like sometimes obsess about which one to pick. And it really doesn't matter. Like even after they've written their essay, they're like, well, it kind of is one, it's kind of four, it's kind of six, or whatever. Just pick seven. It doesn't really matter. They care more about the content. Picking one that people pick less isn't going to help you either. Like it's all about the content. So you're not going to stand out just because you picked one that no one else has picked if your content's not very good. So usually what I tell kids to do is just write your essay and then kind of figure out which prompt it fits under after the fact. Use them as brainstorming, of course, which we'll talk about next.
I
Some
was
brainstorming.
just going to say that I use it for brainstorming techniques and have them outline answer each prompt so I can dig deeper into seeing what their answers could be. But then we don't revisit which prompt we chose until it's time to submit the application.
Yes, because for example, like I think having them fill out like potential answers for all of them, maybe we don't use it for the personal statement, but then like the ideas that they put down for like describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging, like that prompt, maybe then that is transformed into like the why major essay later on, but they've already kind of put down core ideas. So even if it's not used for personal statement, it can be used for one of the many other essays that they're going to have to write. So yeah, giving us more is always better.
And that is why brainstorming is so important. If you do a really thorough job in mapping out every kind of idea and topic that you could cover in the brainstorming pages. Last year, I had a girl whose brainstorming outlines, it was close to 12 pages by the end, and I reference it all the time now. That student did not have to outline or scramble for an essay topic the entire year. She had so many acceptances, all of her reach schools, everything. And I think it's because she did such a great job on the brainstorming groundwork first.
It is something that you cannot put off. Like if you think that you can brainstorm and write a personal statement, a few days before the application is due, that is like probably your first mistake. We definitely do have people who sign up real late with us and maybe are starting all their essays from scratch in September and October. Their essays are going to be way different quality, creativity, just like concept overall than like the student that Michaela was just describing. And colleges do notice that. So do not delay. It is never too early to start brainstorming. Well, maybe it can be a little bit too early to start brainstorming, but if you're a rising senior right now, you should definitely be thinking about these types of things already.
Mm-hmm.
Erin, how do you brainstorm with your kids?
So Michaela and I have sat in on a lot of brainstorming sessions together, but we have a kind of a series of questions, and we, talk through those with students. And I think that those sessions are some of my favorite because we get to know so much about them. And sometimes, it's we're pulling a little harder to get some information out of people. But I think when, with brainstorming, you start picking up momentum. Something to keep in mind is there's nothing that's, well, I don't want to say nothing, not an absolute like that, but the smaller, more unique, the better, the weirder, the better. Those kind of idiosyncratic things that help you stand out, that make you who you are the things that we want to take note of during those brainstorming sessions. So the whole idea is not to look like everyone else. And so with brainstorming, sometimes some of the questions we ask are, if there was, you were, stranded on a desert island and you only had 4 items, like what would those things be? And then kind of have them describe like what they are, why would they have those certain things. Another question we've kind of started asking really over this last most recent cycle is tell us about your social media algorithm. Like what are the things that the algorithm is directing to you? Because we had one student who, Michaela, what did he have? It was like, I feel like he had bears and drag racing like reels, and that's what the algorithm was sending to him. And
It was
and so
something very funny outdoorsy, and I can't remember
yeah, I
what it
can't
was.
remember either, but it was really funny at the time. And so that number one kind of helps break the ice, because personal statements are oftentimes one of the first things that we're really working on. And but then also we're kind of getting some insight into who you are. So these are just some kind of icebreaker questions too that we ask to help dig out the diamonds of, you know, potential topics we could discuss in the personal statement.
And some students don't know what could be a potential topic, and that's why it's so important to do it, with your moon prep mentor, because we'll coax things out of you and we'll be brainstorming, oh my gosh, well, this could turn into this. And it really just flows. So many students come to that meeting with like 5 things written down. And by the end of 30 minutes, we have an entire outline and they are so excited about their essay. And, it's just such a positive experience. And then some students come with a lot of things written down, but everything is really kind of like surface level or shallow. And we have to dig a lot deeper to get to something that is personal statement worthy.
And one other thing too about brainstorming techniques, I know Erin said this before, but like weird is good, like, really small is good. I think some kids like worry about that. Maybe mostly parents worry about that, like, showcasing like too much personality, not being super serious with this. But I mean, I think that that is where kids should be showing their personality. So if they are like naturally funny and like they can write, kind of humor into their personal statements, go for it. Like if you can, if you were like more serious and more analytical, like that's fine too. Like it can be like a little bit more straightforward. So there's really like no one right or wrong way to do it, but definitely don't be afraid to showcase like whatever your personality is. All right, Michaela, will you kick us off with some do's of writing a personal statement?
Absolutely. So number one, you want an interesting opening paragraph, interesting opening lines. We have a whole personal statement presentation that we walk through with students or, rising seniors. And so, we have examples and everything listed on this presentation. So, join Moon Prep and you're going to get all of our ideas. But for right now, an interesting opening paragraph is just something that stands out from the crowd, like not just saying, my name is Michaela and I attend Roanoke High. I mean, the number of essays I read that just start with that, just doing anything different, first of all, stands out. And second of all, you just want to stand out without being too cringy. Like you don't want to say every rose has its thorn or something. You can come up with a better opening than that. And a perfect example of this, as well as doing show, don't tell, because the just telling would be using that musical reference, that lyric line there. But showing and not telling is the perfect example that we talked about of that student whose essay started with having his head shaved. That he listed every little detail. We were brought into the moment of his internal thoughts and everything. It was perfect. He was talking about the ceremony, how it felt watching his hair fall on the floor in front of him and go down the drain. It was so visceral and detailed. It was beautiful. And that was an interesting opening. So just have an interesting opening that's not cringy, or kind of overdone where this is going to stand out. Have it be natural and authentic to yourself. And that's one of the most important things is your opening.
Yeah, I always tell kids to like add a lot of like sensory details into their opening paragraph. And then we can kind of pick what our favorite ones are, because likely we won't have, everything, the things you're seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, whatever, like that might not be relevant. But, having all those details and like at least us getting to see them can help us figure out which ones are going to be the best. And that really does help us show rather than tell, as well as having like that internal like monologue in your head and really analyzing impact too can be helpful. But yeah, opening paragraphs are kind of your first hook into the colleges. So you definitely do want to maybe start with a story, draw them in, and they can kind of go from there. Now, Erin, what are some of your don'ts of writing a personal statement?
So, some don'ts of writing a personal statement. I know we've kind of touched on this, but you don't need to introduce yourself. And really, with a personal statement, it's not just a smattering of all of your accomplishments from your resume. We do want to save some things to talk about in other essays that will, inevitably come later on down the application process. So it's not just how many resume points can we cram into this one essay. And I think Michaela mentioned this earlier too. Like they'll have a copy of your resume and activity list as well. So we don't want to do that. And then also not staying too surface level. I think, having a little bit of skin in the game and putting yourself out there a little bit, whether that's through, a unique talent or an interesting hobby that you have or something that you like to collect, making it real and you seem like a real person, not just, a handshake and that's it. And I think that this is a huge one. All of us can probably agree on this is when you are writing your personal statement, you will probably be tempted to share it with a lot of people, ask people's opinions on it. Hey, can you read this? Tell me what you think. And however many people you ask to read your personal statement is how many opinions you will get. And that means that, somebody's always going to have a suggestion to change this or edit this. So keep your circle small with people that you really trust and value their opinion with that when you're looking at your personal statement and getting feedback. It can get kind of tricky and messy, and it can turn your personal statement into something totally different than what you initially had if you were allowing all of these opinions into the process.
I'm going to interject here too, because this is, I think, the biggest destroyer of essays is that you think you're doing the right thing by asking people. But it does pull your essay in so many different pieces of advice, because they might want you to change like the direction of your essay. And then someone else might see like a different direction for your essay. And so there's, a lot of that advice could be really good, but it's just as hard to incorporate all of it. And one other thing I'll say too is just because someone wrote an essay topic on, music and they got accepted to Brown does not mean if you write an essay topic on music, you will also get into Brown. There was a lot of other factors that went into making that student unique. And so if your friend, did XYZ, it's not like the formula to getting accepted. And same thing, kind of, if they got accepted into Brown does not mean that they know what the college admissions are really looking for. So, I'm always hesitant about taking advice from students who maybe don't have like a good understanding, like current college students who maybe don't have a good understanding of like the personal statement process to like my students, just because they might not know what was good and bad about their own essay or what really did work or what did not work. So ask a few and kind of go forward with the personal statement.
I would say, in my experience, following someone else's formula to try to replicate exactly what they did to try to get into the same school almost never pans out the way they want. So the best formula is to really let the student be their authentic self, and then let the colleges that truly value what they are putting down on the page accept them and be in the best place for them. So to move on, I would like to also jump in with some topics to avoid overall. Just sitting, in the admissions seat, reading these essays, these were topics that were just done often enough that they became stale when you saw too many of these per day. So this would be overcoming an injury, any sort of tragedy or death of a family member, information about why this school, because if the school wants to know, they will put a why us essay, any sort of big win or big loss, like our team worked real hard to get to state, anything like that. Then another one about a time you felt othered, or making your entire essay about someone else. And so they never get to learn anything about you. But also visiting another country and realizing that, you're so fortunate to live in the United States and you don't want to go back to this place you came from and how privileged you feel being here. Those never really hit the right note. But if one of these topics was something that really means a lot to you and you wanted to write about that, it doesn't mean that it's a completely off the table topic. You just need to bring it to your moon prep mentor and we can figure out the right angle, because we know the angles of these topics that have been stale, like the ones we've seen a million times, that come to us with a personal statement written and we're like, oh, that we can't use that. So we will find a better angle for you.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And I think someone mentioned this at the beginning of the call too. It's, if you have 5 friends in high school and you guys are all writing about maybe similar activities, like what makes your story unique? And so that's going to be like the most important thing. It's like, even if you do play tennis or you play a musical instrument and that is really important to you, it's like, well, think about if someone else were to write this story, how might your interaction with this activity be slightly different? Like, what have you potentially learned that might be different? And so it's hard, it is hard to think about those types of things. And so digging below the surface level is typically how you can turn potentially like a cliche topic into something that is uniquely yours. Anything else that you guys want to add about crafting a strong personal statement?
I would just say to not be afraid to show off your personality. It is absolutely okay to add in humor if you are a naturally funny person, but don't feel like you have to force humor in if that's not you. So just whatever your personality is, make sure that comes across on the page. It doesn't have to be any one thing.
Yeah, don't be someone you're not. I had one girl, this was like many years ago, who when she was writing her personal statement, it was so obvious that she was like looking up the synonyms for the words, and like, exchanging it for like a bigger, like more smart sounding word, a smarter sounding word. And so it just like didn't read quite right because the words just like weren't something that she uses in her day-to-day life. It just didn't flow right. And it was pretty obvious that that's what she was doing. And so don't try and be someone you're not. And I just realized at the end of this podcast, we have not talked about ChatGPT yet. Do not use ChatGPT for your essay. Admissions readers know that this is what you're doing. Write it yourself. You start early and write it yourself. They will know that you've ChatGPT'd it.
I just kind of on the ChatGPT thing real quick. It may feel like that you're like saving some time doing that, but you're gonna have to put the work in one way or another, either through brainstorming and crafting it on your own, or through massive edits afterwards, if like ChatGPT is what you're trying to use. Because while it may spit something out efficiently, it's not going to be anything with individualized identity. So it's important that your personal statement showcases you and not what AI thinks you might be. So that's all about that.
Definitely. It definitely is missing that depth and like
Mhm.
specific examples, specific stories of who you are. So don't do it. Don't think that you're smarter than all the other kids by saving time, because I think it really will hurt students through the application cycle. Well, I think that's it for us today on crafting a personal statement. I'm sure we could go on for like 4 more hours about this topic and give you more examples, but we'll rein ourselves in today. But thanks so much for listening to the White Coat Club today. And don't forget to hit subscribe. We'll see you in a couple of weeks with more BSMD and medical school admissions content.